Think about one of the most successful brands in human history. The company whose logo you recognized before you could read. The company that put Michael Jordan in the air and Roger Federer on center court. The company that built a massive global empire by being in every store, on every shelf, in every country on earth, fired its own stores. Not one store, not a bad batch, hundreds of them. Foot Locker, DSW, running specialty shops, accounts that had sold Nike for decades, gone. Deliberately, on purpose, by choice. And for about 18 months, the spreadsheets looked amazing. Then, everything collapsed.
Nike is no longer dominating the running market.
Nike down nearly 13% since it gave disappointing guidance during its earnings.
Shares of Dow component Nike are down sharply. They're now down by about 10.5%.
Let's turn to another retail loser today. That would be Nike, the stock falling 15%.
A stock that has wiped out billions in value, the worst single-day trading in the company's history. And a $100 billion question that nobody inside Nike seemed able to answer. What did we just do? This is not just a story about a shoe company. This is a masterclass in how the smartest move in business can become the most expensive mistake. To understand how far Nike fell, you need to understand how high it climbed. It is 1964. A University of Oregon runner named Phil Knight and his coach Bill Bowerman are selling Japanese running shoes out of the boot of a car. The shoes cost $3.33 a pair. They sell 1,300 pairs in the first year and call the whole operation Blue Ribbon Sports. 11 years later, they rename it Nike. 12 years after that, they sign a 21-year-old basketball player named Michael Jordan to a sponsorship deal so controversial that Jordan himself initially refused it. He wanted Adidas, but his mother convinced him to take the meeting. Nike offered $250,000 a year, 5 times what any other band had paid a rookie. The NBA immediately banned Air Jordan 1 shoe for violating uniform rules. Nike paid $5,000 fine every single time Jordan wore them on purpose because the controversy was free marketing. That is the Nike playbook, bold, athletic, slightly rebellious, built by people who understood sport in their bones because they were athletes themselves. By 2019, Nike is the undisputed king of global sportswear, 37% market share, revenue of nearly $40 billion a year. The swoosh is the most recognized logo on the planet. And then the pandemic hits and Nike makes a decision that on paper is completely logical, a decision that in practice cost them everything. In January 2020, Nike appoints a new CEO. His name is John Donahoe, and he has never worked in sportswear a single day in his life. Before Nike, Donahoe ran eBay. Before that, he was a partner at Bain & Company, the global consulting firm. He is brilliant with data. He is exceptional at digital systems. He is by every account a serious and capable executive. He is also a man who looks at a $40 billion athletic brand and sees primarily one thing, an e-commerce opportunity. Here is the theory, and it is not a stupid one. When you sell Nike shoes through Foot Locker takes a cut. Their margin, their markup, their shelf, their staff, their rent. By the time a pair of Air Max reaches a customer, Foot Locker has captured 30 to 35% of the margin that could have gone to Nike. But if Nike sells directly through its own website, its own app, its own stores, it keeps that margin. Sales go directly from Nike to customer. No middleman. Higher profit per shoe. A direct relationship with the buyer. Customer data Nike can use to personalize, to predict, or to optimize. In a spreadsheet, that is a brilliant idea. There is just one problem. Nike is not selling spreadsheets. Between 2020 and 2022, Nike terminates hundreds of wholesale accounts. Foot Locker, one of Nike's most important retail partners, watches its Nike allocation shrink by nearly a third. Specialty running stores, the shops where serious athletes actually go to buy shoes, get fitted, get advice, suddenly find their Nike supply drying up, and the competitors notice immediately. This is the moment when two brands that nobody was talking about decided to move. Hoka and On Running. Hoka in 2020 has a revenue of $352 million. A niche brand, trail runners, ultra marathon people, not mainstream. On Running in 2020 has revenue of around $450 million. A Swiss brand, Roger Federer is a co-owner. Interesting but small. Both brands call every specialty running store that Nike just abandoned. Both brands says, we have product, we want your shelf space, we will support you. And the store says yes. By 2025, Hoka is generating $2.2 billion in revenue. On Running is at $3.6 billion. Both companies have grown over 500% in 5 years. They did not out-innovate Nike, they didn't outspend Nike, they didn't out-market Nike. Nike handed them the market, literally cleared the shelves and said, "Here, take it." But it gets worse because the direct-to-customer strategy does not just open the door for rivals, it creates a chain reaction inside Nike that nobody had modeled on the spreadsheet. Problem 1. You lose the retail staff who recommend your product. A runner walks into Foot Locker. They don't know what shoe they want. The staff member who has been trained by Nike, who knows the range, who can assist, recommends a Nike. That sale is gone now. The runner goes to the running store. The running store recommends Hoka. Problem 2. Your inventory risk explodes. When Nike sold wholesale, Foot Locker bought the inventory. If it didn't sell, that was Foot Locker's problem. Now Nike owns all its own inventory, and when you are predicting demand for millions of shoes across every market in the world, you get it wrong. Nike gets it spectacularly wrong. Inventory skyrockets. To move it, they discount. Discounting destroys the premium positioning that justifies the price. The swoosh starts to feel like a brand you find on a sale rack. Problem 3. The internal restructuring. To power the direct model, Donahoe reorganizes Nike from the inside. The sports-specific teams, the running team, the basketball team, the football team, the group of engineers who spend their careers understanding exactly what athletes need are dissolved into generic categories: men's, women's, kids. The people who knew sports go to On Running, to Hoka, to New Balance. They take the knowledge with them. Nike's product pipeline stalls. And then 28 June 2024 arrives. Nike reports its quarterly earnings. Revenue is down. The forecast is worse. The market, which had believed in the turnaround story for 4 years, finally stops believing. In a single afternoon, Nike loses $28 billion in market capitalization. The stock drops 20%, the worst single-day performance since Nike's IPO in 1980. 130 million shares traded, 13 times the normal volume. Every institutional fund that has ever held Nike is asking the same question at the same moment. Is this over? I want to tell you about Roger Federer for a moment. Federer wore Nike for 24 years, from 1994 to 2018. He was one of the most visible Nike athletes alive. Wimbledon, the US Open, the Australian Open. Wherever the best tennis in the world was being played, there was a swoosh. In 2018, Federer leaves Nike. He joins On Running, not as a sponsored athlete, but as a co-owner and a board member. He takes equity in the company. He is not wearing their shoes because they paid him. He is wearing their shoes because he believes in the business. And then something remarkable happens. Federer, at 44, retired from professional tennis, widely considered the greatest of all time, starts running ads for On Running. And the ads work. Not because they are clever, because they are authentic, because the product is good, because the man promoting it actually chose the brand over Nike. Every time those ads run, they are implicitly saying the same thing. The greatest athlete Nike ever dressed chose to leave Nike. What does it say about a brand when the people it built its reputation on stop believing in it? In October 2024, Nike does something unusual for a company of its size. It admits it was wrong. John Donahoe steps down as CEO. In his place, Nike reaches back into his own history and pulls out Elliott Hill, a 32-year Nike veteran who started as a sales intern and worked his way to running the company's North American and European operations before retiring in 2020. Hill is the anti-Donahoe in almost every measurable way. He grew up inside Nike's culture, understands its athletes, understands the operation. His first act is to rebuild the wholesale relationships. He calls Foot Locker, JD Sport, he calls the running stores. He says, "We made a mistake, we want to come back." Some of them say yes, some of them say we have moved on. By early 2026, there are early signs that the strategy is working. Wholesale revenue is climbing, North American sales are recovering. The stock has stabilized, but there are problems Hill cannot simply apologize away. Here is what Nike teaches us, and it is not a lesson about shoes. Nike didn't lose because Hoka made a better shoe. Nike lost because it believed the brand could survive being separated from the places where the brand was actually experienced. It believed the swoosh was so powerful that customers would follow it anywhere, to a website, to an app, to a direct store, regardless of how inconvenient that was. They were wrong. The swoosh is not the moat. The relationship between the brand and the customer, maintaining through every touch point, every store, every recommendation, that's the moat. When you remove the touch point, you remove the moat. When you remove the moat, the castle falls. Now in June 2026, Nike has a moment. The FIFA World Cup is being played across North America. Nike has spent an estimated $5 billion on marketing for the tournament. Every major national team kit, every major player, the swoosh will be on more screen, in more homes, across more countries than any point in the past 5 years. It is, depending on who you ask, either a turning point or a last stand. If Elliott Hill's restructuring holds, the product pipeline delivers the innovation the culture team has promised, if the margin recover, if Hoka and Ondaning don't take another leap forward while Nike is looking at the World Cup, Nike could be back.